Hi there, my name is Ann Bennett. I am a family law attorney with Beresford Booth, and my webinar today is going to be about how holidays can help you contemplate all issues in your family law matter. So when you're dealing with family law issues, we're talking about property division, we're talking about parenting plans, we're talking about child support issues as well. So around this time in particular, we do get calls about specifically Halloween. We get calls about Thanksgiving break, who's supposed to have the kids, when are they supposed to have the kids, the whole break, just Thanksgiving, winter break, all of those issues. So Halloween is an interesting holiday for those parents and co-parents out there. Because some parents really want to engage in trick-or-treating with the kids. They want to take pictures with the costumes. They want to make their costumes or buy their costumes. Who decides what the kids are actually going to be for Halloween? These are all issues that you should address, particularly if they are important to you, because what we have in Washington State is called the mandatory form parenting plan. There is nothing included about Halloween, and other than having a blank checkbox for you, there's nothing determining who gets Thanksgiving or Christmas or any of those things. So what you will see in Section 10 of your mandatory form parenting plan is just this holiday box. So we've determined that Martin Luther King Jr. Day is something that should be specified, but Halloween isn't in there. So if you do want to include which parent has the kids, if you're going to alternate years, then you would have to write in Halloween as an other occasion important to the family. The other question that we do get is also about costs for purchasing, let's say, costumes. I mean, if you have 4 children and you want to go to Spirit Halloween and buy them each, their own individual outfit, that could be $60 a kid or something like that. So, if that's 4 children, you're talking about $240, which, that's expensive. So the best way to address these issues, if you don't have it in your plan, it's just going to follow the regular schedule. So if it falls on a weekend or a weekday, whatever your regular schedule says about your school schedule and who gets what day, that's just how it will be. If you do want to make sure that this is identified, and perhaps each parent would like the opportunity to take the kids or take pictures with the kids in their costumes or things of that nature, you would need to identify that in Section 10 of your parenting plan. So this is an example where we've specified Halloween as another occasion important to the family. And every year they're going to be with whoever the assigned residential parent is, except in this case, the other parent would have the opportunity to pick the kids up maybe after school until 6 o'clock, where then the residential parent can take them trick-or-treating. This is actually an issue that comes up quite often, particularly the younger the kids are. There's specific age ranges where this is a big deal. So in order to avoid conflict and make sure that the kids are really getting the most out of the holiday and being able to spend quality time with each parent, certainly identify those things. The other issue is cost. So if you are the parent with residential time, then the expectation is going to be on you. You're taking the children trick-or-treating, you're facilitating whatever Halloween activities they may have, and you're going to buy their costumes. Now, this is a unique situation, but and it's not accounted for in standard child support. So if there is an anticipation, again, like an example where you have a lot of kids, or you each want them to have elaborate costumes, you can include things like that in your child support order. but you have to make sure they're included. Otherwise, that's just an assumption that it's included in your basic transfer support obligation. So whatever you're receiving for support is what you would use to purchase costumes for the kids. Now, in this example, we've said a proportional share, Halloween costumes for all children. And this would be something that would be relevant. Let's say if you spend more than $100 on costumes, and you'd pay proportionately based on your child support order. You want to make sure there's proof of what costume that you actually purchased those costumes for the kids, and then you want to give a timeline for the reimbursing parent to pay you back. That's just an example, but again, if it's not included in your order, there is no expectation. So this is something, again, that is helpful to avoid conflict when we're talking about supporting the kids, and we're talking about making sure they can get the most out of the holiday. The other holidays that come up around this time are our Thanksgiving break. And so you can define this as a break, or you can define it as a day. So you want to make sure you identify, when does the actual holiday begin? Does it begin when the children are released from school on Wednesday, presumably? Or if you have a different or non-traditional school, maybe they're off the whole week. So maybe the Friday prior is the release from school day. But you do want to be as specific as possible to ensure there's no ambiguity about what release from school means, or where the children are getting picked up from, or if you're sharing the holiday. Some people want to have the kids on the morning of Thanksgiving and have the other parent have them the evening of Thanksgiving. That's a little more rare, but again, if it's included in your parenting plan, then that is the expectation. You can share the holiday, and if you have a good co-parenting relationship and perhaps you live very close to your co-parent, these are things that can be easily facilitated. And the more comprehensive you are in drafting the language, the easier it will be to parent with your co-parent. So in section 10, again, in a standard form, that's what it looks like. Now, if you want to be, again, as specific as possible, now these are examples that you can write in for the Thanksgiving break, because perhaps one of the parents wants to travel with the children. Let's say you want to go to Disney World or something like that. But if there's something that contradicts that says you have to share the holiday, that's going to be a problem. So you can put in language in this example where we would say, if a parent does plan to travel with the children for the holiday, perhaps you can make that a priority year for each parent. So maybe mom in even years can have the option to elect to travel. Dad in odd years can have the option to elect to travel. You would want to make sure that you include a notice provision in terms of when we would have to notify other parent that we are wanting to travel for the holidays, or if you do intend to remain local for the holidays. But again, if there's nothing included in the order, then it just follows your regular residential schedule. So this becomes an issue, particularly right after parents that are divorcing file for divorce. It's kind of the Wild West. There's no identified plan at all. So, a parent, and if a parenting plan doesn't identify it, then it just follows what your schedule is. So that can create problems, and that's what we want to avoid. The other common parenting arrangement that has become more common as the years have gone on is a long distance parent. So a lot of times a long distance parent, let's say they live 1,000 miles away, they will be awarded the full holiday break or the full Thanksgiving break, which they can elect to spend, let's say in Washington state or in their home state. And if you don't identify long distance transportation in your child support order, then there is no expectation as to who pays that expense. So in order, again, for there to be low or no risk of any sort of conflict about who is paying for the kids to do what, If you do have a long distance parent and they are exercising the break with the children in their home state, then you could say, they would share proportionately the round trip plane travel for the children to visit the parent in their home state. You'd want to make sure there's a clause in there about reasonability. So time should be reasonable, the date of booking should be reasonable, and the class of travel should be reasonable. So, economy class booked at least a month in advance, and should be between, let's say, 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. And a lot of that's going to be determinative on how old your children are, if they're able to travel alone, if there's underage fees, that sort of thing. But in general, you want to include things like that, because if it's not included, then there's no expectation. And then, if there's not a long distance plan and you want to travel with the kids, you want to make sure that the parent who's electing to travel is the one that is solely going to pay that expense. And there's no harm in making it clear that that is the arrangement. If there's any ambiguity, that's where the harm comes in. So it's important to be as specific as possible when talking about these sorts of things, and crafting orders. The other issue, winter break. We often get questions around this time about, especially if there's no parenting plan in place, or if there is a temporary parenting plan, but no holiday schedule, what do we do for winter break? Well, when does the holiday begin and end? You'll have to specify that. So if it's released from school, right before the break, and then return to school, for that, whatever, 2.5 week period, if that's how we define the break, do you want to split the break? Do you want it to be half and half? Do you want each parent to share Christmas Day, for example? Because again, if we're not specifying this in the order, there's no order. There's no anything that would require you to go along with anything. And if you can't agree to a schedule, then the court's going to have to make a decision for you. And I think it's surprising the amount of people that don't contemplate these things when they're crafting a temporary parenting plan, and they end up in court the week before the Christmas holiday because it's not been decided and they can't agree. So it's really important to think about these holidays, particularly if you have kids and you are going through a separation or a divorce, because it's a great way to avoid conflict. It's a great way to kind of set up a structure for future years, even if it is just a temporary parenting plan. I think it's also important to note that in 2024, Hanukkah begins on December 25th and ends on January 2nd. So depending on what your religious preferences are, or, if one parent's family happens to celebrate Hanukkah and the other one celebrates Christmas, that's likely going to be an issue in 2024. So I think it's best to put these things on the table now, particularly, and certainly not, wait until December 16th of next year. But that is going to be important when you're assigning holidays and coming to an agreement, if you can, about them. Also, the travel with the children. Can you travel on winter break? Are you going to put that in your parenting plan? Sure, you can fly to Hawaii. The out-of-state travel orders are important to identify. So if you as a co-parent have no issue with the other parent taking the children out of state for a break, identify the amount of time that they can be out of state, where they are permitted to go. So, let's say Canada, Mexico, and any US state. But if they want to take them to Europe or something, are you going to have an issue with that? Who is paying for the travel? And then the other thing that often becomes somewhat of a point of contention is gifts for the children. So in households where there's an income discrepancy, what you want to avoid is, in higher earning household, the children get really fancy, nice gifts. But in the lower earners household, they can't really afford that. So have a conversation with your co-parent, if you can, about what the expectations are for gifts. Perhaps if there are some pricey items, there can be some sort of joint gifting for the children, but it typically makes one of the lower earner parent feel bad not to be able to provide that same level of gifting, even though it's material goods, but kids are kids and they like gifts. So now with respect to the winter break, again, this is not going to be identified until you write it in the parenting plan. When are you residing with mom? When are you residing with dad? Are we going to have a Christmas Eve and Christmas Day assignment? So in this instance, what we have done is say, what winter break is, when does it start, how it's divided equally, who has priority in which years, and then if for specifically Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, who does what. And for a lot of people, it's important to share these days, and that can become uncomfortable, particularly in going through a separation, because it's a lot of exchanges on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. So you want to take into account maybe lessening the amount of transition for the kids, but still exercising the day that's important to you. Is it Christmas Eve? Is it Christmas Day? And how can we facilitate the children enjoying that the most without having to do a whole lot of transport to one house or the other? Additionally, as I mentioned before, long distance plans are likely going to take into account that a long distance parent may have the entirety of the break because they don't get to see the kids as often. And, this would be dependent on how important it was to the residential parent or the Washington home state parent to have that, Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, so that they get to spend the holiday too with the kids. But if there is a long distance plan that assigns that time to the out-of-state parent, the long distance parent, then it might be fair again to have the round trip travel cost covered for the kids to go visit mom or dad out of state, and that way proportionately share. Say the same thing about reasonability, so economy class travel, booked no less than 30 days in advance at reasonable times. And then again, I do want to underscore discussing gifts with a co-parent, because we get a lot of questions about, oh, dad bought them a phone that I didn't know anything about, that sort of thing, particularly with social media and capabilities that cell phones have, tablets, that sort of thing. You want to make sure that you're discussing what you're gifting, and so it seems equitable to the kids, and they can have the parents can have just as good a time as the kids during that period of break. Another issue is going to be Monday holidays. So the kids will be off school. That doesn't mean you're off of work, but it does mean the kids are off of school. So in your mandatory form, Washington State Parenting Plan, they do have Martin Luther King Day, President's Day. They do identify Memorial Day, Labor Day. They don't identify in-school work days, which can be assigned either Monday or Friday. But basically, any Monday holiday is going to have the kids not going to school, clearly. So when you're crafting a parenting plan, does one parent always have Mondays off? Because that's an easy way to deal with the issue. The kids can spend some quality time with that parent. There's no onus on the other parent to find daycare or things of that nature. And the other thing to think about is, will it fall on a school break? So President's Day, for example, depending on what school you're in, may fall in what we call the midwinter break. And so you would want to specify, like in this plan, where you'd say midwinter break, if it includes President's Day, this is what we do. We'll split the break in half. It includes President's Day. If we don't, then every year they're with mom, let's say Friday to Monday. And that's because one of them is essentially a 10-day period of time, because if Friday released from school, Monday return to school, that's your midwinter break. If it's just that Monday holiday, then that's obviously less time to spend with the kids. But if that's not included, or if it's ambiguous, because if we say President's Day every year, but we also say midwinter break and we don't identify President's Day, then those two can be conflicting. And then what do? If you can't agree, then the court's going to have to make a decision for you. So it's important to think about how these holidays operate and how they might coincide with other holidays or other breaks that your co-parent may have. Also, traveling out of state. Again, if the kids want to go to, or you want to take the kids up to British Columbia, it's certainly close to Seattle, not super far to go away, but it's international travel. So you could spend a long weekend in Canada, but you want to make sure that we identify, it's okay for either parent to do that. So the other things to think about, because we do often have people that want to take those 3-day weekends in British Columbia, where are the children's passports? Do the children have passports? How do we get passports from one parent to the other? And then who would pay for the renewal? So we would like to identify that, the who is going to pay the cost. So if it's 50-50, as this includes, great. Yeah, you can do whatever split that you would like. If the mother holds the passports, how far in advance does the father have to request the passport to travel? What is the notice period to say we do want to travel? And in this instance, with respect to travel to Canada, you could have a travel authorization issued every year, just to say it's always fine to go there, so that you don't have to worry about getting stopped at the border to say, did other parent agree to this? It's reasonable to include some language about a travel itinerary. I don't think it's necessary to provide a specific day-by-day, activity-by-activity list, but certainly what the overall plan is for traveling. Are we taking a plane, train, or automobile? Where are we staying? Even, the hotel, whatever city, if you intend to travel within that country or travel to other countries. But language, again, if this isn't included, it's all just ambiguous. So even things like who is going to hold the children's passports, those are things that you should consider, and then consider delivery when, another parent wants to travel out of state or internationally with the kids. Now, summer vacation is also, that was just an issue for us, but a lot of people would like to take, up to a week, maybe 2 of vacation with the kids. And again, if that's not identified in your plan, then you don't have that time. So absent an agreement between the parents, you can always agree to deviate from your schedule. But if there's nothing in there, then there's no award of, let's say, 2 weeks vacation in the summer. The other point is to define the summer schedule. So are we defining it at the release from school at the end of the school year to when school begins? Are we defining it by specific dates, June 1st to August 31st, which you can do. This is all the typical way to define the summer is release from school and return to school, but you can do it however you wish. If you want to define it by specific days, that's fine. And then how much vacation do you think each parent should have? If it's 2 weeks, are we going to exercise that in a continuous 2-week period? Are we going to exercise that in 2 1-week blocks? How are we allowing each parent to exercise that time? Also, Father's Day falls in the summer. So if if mother has priority in certain years to take vacation and they want to exercise time over the Father's Day weekend, but father is granted the Father's Day every year, then what happens? So you want to make sure that you think about these things in advance before you enter, a final parenting plan. 4th of July is the big deal for most of the major summer holidays. And so what I would suggest is that if one of the parents, let's say their family has a cabin somewhere, and every year the kids have gone there, and that's a big deal for that parent's family to do, let's say a week vacation for 4th of July, then maybe they're awarded that time every year, and that's part of their 1 week vacation. And you can do that. You can award them every year. 4th of July, you don't have to alternate just because that's the expectation. Travel expenses, again, if you're a long distance parent and this is the bulk of your time, then perhaps it is fair to share proportionately those round trip plane tickets for the kids. If it's just a vacation, likely it's more equitable for the parent that's traveling with the children to pay all of the expenses for the kids. But if not identified, again, you don't know. The other issue that often comes up for summer is the summer camps, because that's not daycare and that's not education necessarily. So if the kids want to do a summer camp, who's going to pay for that? And so what you would want to do is identify that specifically, again, in the child support order to say summer camps. And if one parent is afraid the other parent is going to sign them up for some ridiculous $5,000, 3-day camp, you can put a cost limit on there. You can say, we must agree to summer camps, but it would be beneficial to identify this in your child support order, because if not, whichever parent is registering them for these things is likely going to bear the brunt of that expense. So the way that you would see a summer vacation schedule in your mandatory form parenting plan is just the way that it appears on the left here. So in section 9, this is the checkbox, which it's certainly more helpful, we find, to do something more like the right, where you would clearly identify, what your overnight periods are, what your, if you have a 14-day block, or the option to exercise 2 7-day blocks, who has priority in which years to do that. But what you want to make sure of is that it's very specific. When you can exercise time, when are the children going to be picked up, when are they going to be returned, and what you really want to do is avoid any ambiguity, which is just a way to avoid conflict. So it's helpful that, in section 9 it makes you think about the summer schedule, but it's better to have something comprehensive in there if you think each parent does want to exercise some summer vacation with the kids. So as I mentioned, the travel expenses for the children, if it's a long distance plan, you would want to put that in the other shared expenses section of your child support order. And you would also want to identify what will happen if there are conflicts in scheduling. So for example, we've said section 11 addresses conflicts. So the example I mentioned before was that if mom wants to exercise her summer vacation over Father's Day, father actually has priority there, because the named holidays, which is specified to Father's Day, must be followed before the summer schedule. So if dad says that's okay, then that's fine. But if dad doesn't say that's okay, then there's a conflict And we say, okay, follow Father's Day before you follow the summer vacation schedule. Again, identifying where there can be conflicts and resolving those issues within the pleading is really important. It also will help if there's an enforcement issue later down the road, because you want it to be as clear as possible, where there can be no ambiguity. There can be no argument that we need to clarify this. It's clear here that this says if there's a conflict, Father's Day is followed before summer schedule. So that's an unambiguous argument. As I've harped on the entire time, you want to be as specific as you can in these orders. You want to be as comprehensive. You want to include you want to think about really hypotheticals while you're drafting these orders, and then come up with a solution before it's a final plan. What we do get a lot of questions on, and this does pertain to expenses for holidays as well, is that your child support obligation, your standard transfer payment, is for basic necessities. That is it. If there are additional expenses that you would like the other parent to share in, you must include them in your child support order. So specifically, long distance transportation costs to and from the parents for visitation purposes, they are not included. If you want them included, you must add them. And it's important also to note that this is for visitation purposes. It's not for vacation purposes. So you could have a provision in the order that makes it appear as though anytime a parent is purchasing plane tickets for a child, there is supposed to be a proportionate share of the expense shared between the parents. That's not the intent of child support. The intent is to equally apportion that cost for visitation purposes. But again, you must be specific that it is for visitation. It is not for vacation, because otherwise, if they have 8 flights because other parent is taking them to a bunch of different places and you haven't been specific in your child support order, you must include that. The holidays and breaks should be assigned, and the language must be clear so everybody knows who has the children, at what time, where they're getting picked up, where they're getting dropped off. How are we apportioning this every year as we go forward? As it relates to property division, I know this has been mostly related to parenting and to child support, but I just thought this was funny, and it's Halloween related, so I thought it was a good note to end on. But for thinking about property division, in this case, there was an Australian woman who argued that she had a haunted house in order to reduce the appraised value of her home, so she had a better chance of being able to afford it, and it would be lower on the value distribution, it would show less of an award to her. I do think that the language from the judge was funny in this case, where he said, "I found this account of the alleged haunting to be unbelievable, and I am satisfied that the claim was fabricated for an ulterior purpose, namely as an attempt to influence the valuer to return a low valuation on the former matrimonial home." So yes, it makes you think of appraised property, but I did think it was funny, and it's thematically appropriate. The other property division pieces that relate to holidays are vacation pay. It's vacation and sick pay, but that might be community property if they're unused, if they are vested, and if they are mature. You should inquire. Each party should inquire as to what vacation and sick pay benefits the other party has, because that's subject to distribution in a dissolution action. Some interesting issues that we've seen have to do with tangible personal property awards, and a couple cases that we've had related to Christmas items, ornaments specifically, but lights, the fake trees that people have. But there are other tangible property related to holidays that you would think people might not care about, but maybe they do. And that's something that you want to make sure you identify, so there's no ambiguity in that. The expectation is clear, the award is clear. Do you have any holiday timeshares? Sometimes people like to exercise family vacation times at a timeshare, whatever, Weston or something like that. That's community property subject to division. So, think about which parent wants to do that, or which party wants to do that. If you don't, because getting rid of timeshares can be difficult and costly. So if one party wants to keep it, if you have kids and you like to take them there, if you want to alternate that, you could do it. But these are all issues. And when you're thinking about holidays, there are all these tertiary issues that come up that can help you think about other issues in your family law case, whether it be, who's paying what for supporting the kids, who's taking time with the kids, what property are we being awarded. So I thought it was helpful just to kind of go over some holidays and how that can help in all matters related to your family law case. So if you do have any questions, feel free to email me. This is my email and my phone number. And I hope you enjoyed the webinar.